We have county first tonight.
Yep. No.
Yep.
All right.
Good.
I'd like to call to order the May 23rd County Commissioners meeting. Announcements? None. No announcements. Any public? Oh, just one. Oh, the County Commission meeting is being video and audio recorded. Is there any public comment? Any new business? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes and warrants. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And motion to approve the payroll and treasury warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any commissioners' reports or comments?
No.
None? With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nice job, Rita.
Thank you.
I'd like to call the Select Board meeting of May 23rd, 2018 to order. We have one change to the agenda. We're going to move, in Town Manager's Report, we're going to move the Audit Manager's Letter overview to the beginning. So someone can catch a boat plane way off the island. Announcements, Libby?
This meeting is being audio and video recorded. We have a number of vacancies coming up for 2018 committee, board, and commissions. We do have a public hearing tonight for kind of our first round of applications. There's another public hearing on June 6th for sort of the second round. There's a lot of information on the town website if people are interested in volunteering, and committee appointments will be done on June 27th at the board's meeting on that date. The fire chief, I think, is going to tell us about upcoming, I guess it's this week, Emergency Medical Services Week, right? And talk a bit about the rollout of the Advanced Life Support Program that has been negotiated with the fire union.
Good evening, and thank you for the proclamation for EMS Week. It's an important week to recognize all the EMTs and paramedics and first responders that actually come out and do good work all year round. As for the ALS, I want to thank the union, which is here, the union president and vice president, working with us, along with the finance department and human relations, town administration, and the select board. This is a 20-year, truly 20-year adventure to bring ALS close to this island, and it's a really, really big, important step. So thank you, everybody involved. Hopefully this fall we'll have our first class, and be moving forward then to have actually providing ALS paramedics on the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Fire Union. Appreciate it. Are we going to read that?
Oh, sure. I'll read the proclamation, EMS Week proclamation. It's May 20th to the 26th. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical service teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas the emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventive medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical service teams, whether career or voluntary, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value of the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, the Select Board of Nantucket, Massachusetts, in recognition of this event, to hereby proclaim the week of May 20th to 26th, 2018 as Emergency Medical Service Week.
Great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Town offices will be closed Monday, May 28th, in observance of Memorial Day, and there is a parade, the annual parade, which is Sunday, starts at 1 p.m., and it meets at the Legion. There's no board meeting next Wednesday, May 30th. It's a fifth Wednesday, and the board will be reviewing providing a presentation on its strategic plan to date on June 20th. I think that's it.
Thank you, Libby. Is there any public comment here tonight that on an issue that's not on the agenda? Tobias?
Thank you, Jason. Tobias Glidden from Vineyard Power. I just wanted to come and announce to the board and the public that Vineyard Wind won the bid for the state's RFP to do an 800 megawatt wind facility. And so we're just really excited about that. And Vineyard Power is looking forward to working with the town and the community more to bring that project to fruition. We're going to be doing a lot more work, reaching out to the summer residents. We have a big push for that. And just really excited. So I wanted to give you guys that announcement.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other public comment here tonight? Not on the agenda? Seeing none, there's no new business. Is there a motion to approve minutes for May 9th, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have payroll warrants and treasury warrants. Hearing no comments on those, we'll consider those approved. Pending contracts. Is there anything you wanted to go over, Libby, or questions from the board?
I didn't have anything to specifically call out now, unless anybody has any questions.
Board members?
Make a motion they're approved.
Well, can I add one? I'll approve them, but Matticat culverts for Long Pond, is that the stuff Bobby's been talking about?
This is an engineering agreement to evaluate the culverts, but it will lead to an evaluation of what he's talking about.
Right, that's what I was hoping I'd hear.
It's getting there.
Yes, there we go.
Okay, so there's a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move to the audit. You're up next.
Does that need to be approved?
I'm sorry, Libby, was that the collective bargaining for the unions? That was part of the pending contracts, correct?
Yeah, it was a ratification of a vote that the board already took.
That included that.
Yes.
Pending contracts, okay.
It was on the back page, single, looked like it was
sorry.
separate.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, audit, you're up.
Well, thank you, and thank you for moving me to the front so I can catch my boat. And I apologize for calling this Board of Selectmen. I understand that's been changed to Select Board. Libby, you usually catch these things.
Sorry.
That's okay. So without further ado, this is our fifth audit of the town of Nantucket. And the town's come a long way, both financially and internal controls that have been improved dramatically since we first started the audits back in, I think 2013 was our first audit. And I think this is the year that we're finally seeing there's not a lot of loose ends. So every year there's been progress, but we've never gotten to a point where everything's kind of going where it should be. And I think that's where we are this year. And for fiscal 18, we actually did some interim work a couple of weeks ago, my staff, and that momentum is continuing. So I'm happy to report that this is a really nice accomplishment on the internal control end, just as a segue into the presentation. And that, there we go. Okay, so when I do my presentation, what I like to talk about is where the town, first of all, is talk about where the town is financially, and then we'll get into some of the informational items and some of the findings as a result of the audit. So you can see that from 2009, the town has gone from about between 7 and 8 million in reserve balance to over 17 million, almost 17.5 million in both 16 and 17. 16 and 17 were flat, which is something I like to see. You don't want this to continue to just go into the stratosphere. I think that's a nice flat line. What I'm seeing is a nice combination of saving the taxpayers some money through levy capacity and excess levy capacity, and also using free cash to replenish some of your capital items, and it's a very good balance that I'm seeing. So I would expect this reserve balance to be about the same as long as this philosophy is maintained into the foreseeable future. And the bond rating agencies love this, and it's really a win-win for the taxpayer, I think. Any questions on this? And just to kind of reiterate, the town is close to is actually over 30% now on the that graph is a little misleading. It's about 34 or 35%, and which is an important number we'll talk about in a second. And you're well above the state average. And the high-end metrics, bond ratings like to see 15%. Moody's likes to see 30%, and it's especially important in a community like Nantucket because you have other things that could potentially happen on the island where your reserves need to be a little higher than a town that's on the mainland just because of the cost of doing business in an emergency situation. So the rating agencies do like to see, especially Moody's, they like to see reserves above 30%, which is where you're at. Questions on this? And you can see you're well above your peers. The state average is around 10%. So just to kind of summarize this, financial trends remain excellent. Your metrics are exceeding the high-end credit rating floors of S&P, which is 15%, and Moody's, which is 30%. You're well above the state averages. Your new growth has migrated back to your 2005 levels. You continue to walk a nice balanced line between reserves and levy capacity, excess levy capacity. And recently, the town has gotten a AA+ from Standard & Poor's, and Moody's, which was the only bond rating agency rating you back in 2012, which used to be an A1, you've gone to a AA1 positive. So you're one notch, you're a hair under the AAA, and building momentum in that regard. There was a conference call with Moody's a couple of weeks ago, and they were very pleased with the way things are going. So we're hoping that that's really the next step and the crowning achievement for the town. From an investment appeal, you're in the top 15%. And from what the finance director was telling me today, your recent excursion into the markets for your most recent borrowing is yielding very good interest. You're yielding AAA interest rate right now. So your investors are looking at this like you're a AAA community. That's how well the bids are coming in on the town's bonds. Any questions?
I have one. Tony, you touched on working very hard to improve our bond rating at AAA. Can you comment on the town's efforts to achieve that in the near term?
To achieve it? And there's one thing on this next slide, I believe. Yeah, okay, so we can put this up while we talk. Some of the things that the towns, again, creating momentum, managing your OPEB liability. Okay, so one of the things that the OPEB liability, I believe, was about $89 million, but your plan design was not strong. Your portfolio was not in a managed investment account, and you also hadn't taken into account the pension windfall. So we've had some, between myself, Brian, and the actuary, we've had conversations with addressing plan design, which you did, addressing the managed investment side of your portfolio, which I believe is going to happen, if not already, before the end of the year. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the pension windfall. The pension windfall is the amount of money that becomes available when you've fully funded your pension, which is going to happen sometime around 2032 or somewhere in that range. I don't know the exact year. So a significant amount of money that's already baked into your budget will become available at that point. And what I pushed with the finance office is to look out there and say, can we set a policy that we will use that money to be more aggressive with OPEB? And I think from the initial calculations that the actuary did, it showed that the OPEB would be fully funded by the 2040s. Mid-2040s, if that were to happen. So I'd like to see the board work that into your financial policies. that you had approved last year, maybe make an amendment to your financial policy. So that's one of the things that is going to help push to the next level on AAA. And also, one of the things that got done this year is from a GAAP standpoint. And GAAP is how you prepare your financial statements as opposed to the accounting used in the state of Massachusetts. From a GAAP standpoint, with the help of the audit committee approved putting the landfill and the nursing home in with the general fund activities. So this created a situation where it took Moody's attention away from the fact that those activities were running at a deficit. So whereas before they were run as standalone enterprise funds and the deficit stood right out, it was a question every year. What's going on with those deficits? What's going on with those deficits? By moving those into the general fund, it kind of confirmed that the town is funding those deficits every year through their budget. And putting it into the general fund kind of confirmed that, as opposed to having them out on their own as enterprise funds. What I'm putting here is that the town consider actually rescinding the legislation and doing it on a statutory basis, these two particular enterprise funds. So those would be some things that could get you to the next level.
So those things all need to be done in your mind before we get AAA?
It's so close now that, that last one, they may, based on our last conference call, Moody's may have gotten past it based on the way it was treated in the financials. But I thought it might be something that if it continues to come up and you continue to only get your AA plus, maybe the question is posed to Moody's. If we did this on for statutory purposes, will it get us to the next level? The OPEB is something all communities in Massachusetts are wrestling with. I'm not sure how much they'll penalize you for it, but there's definitely no downside in doing what I've described there.
Back to the island home, et cetera. The recommendation in there was talking about how we can still report those as standalone and look at those as standalone, which I think the board, now and in the future should do, because it's very important to look at how much individual departments are increasing and not take our focus off of it. We're not just trying to get AAA, which is nice. Yeah. And if we're already getting AAA pricing, yeah, we're kind of there already. I don't know that there's a lot of other advantages.
Yeah, and it's a policy thing. Yeah. If the town has asked what could get us there, this is one of my recommendations. Right. But it's a policy thing. Right. If it's not something the town wants to do, obviously.
Yeah, I think we should do it, but I think we should still make sure we're keeping our eye on it and watching how much individual apartments increase.
Like we'd manage everything. Yeah.
Like we manage everything, but these get particular attention. The other recommendation when you were talking about increasing the OPEB, that was the $500,000 was something that I put in place when I was on the recommended in place when I was on the finance committee 10 years ago. And they're recommending that we increase that, and I think that's very important based on for a lot of different reasons. It's the right thing to do, but I think it's pretty important. So
yeah, I'll be excited to see what the new liability looks like for 18 once the actuary is factored in these items. Any other questions on?
Well, just to close the loop, Jason, that might be something, that policy change that we might want to consider and bring back at some point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on bond rating? Okay. One of the other items on this page, informational items, is single audit changes. This has been in the last couple of management letters. And basically, because the town is the recipient of over $750,000 in federal money, most of that being airport-related grants that are funded by the federal government, you're required to document your internal control framework. This is a new requirement. We've been working with Brian's staff to help them implement this, and estimating that it will be implemented by the end of this fiscal year. So for the next audit, that won't exist. It'll exist as an accomplishment. Okay. Okay, so let's look at some prior items first. These are items that have been on the last few management letters, and I just wanted to put them here just to show where they stand now. They're all, except for the first one, they're still work in progresses. Some of these take a little bit longer to correct. The closing process, which is what I was kind of talking about at the beginning of the discussion, that's been a process that the town has historically had challenges with, dating back years and years. This year was great. Everything was smooth, everything balanced. Everything rolled forward the way it should. So as I've said here, it's improved significantly. We removed a significant deficiency from the report. The close was timely, it was accurate, and based on what we've seen so far in 18, I don't see how this won't continue to get better. Any questions on that? And this was a challenge. This took a lot of effort. You really had to find out what people's strengths were in the financial departments and say, okay, this is your best thing to do. This is your best thing to do, and bring it all together. And there's a lot of moving parts here in Nantucket, a lot. It's just there's just so much going on, and I just want to congratulate the staff on this. This was really great to see. On the, we've had comments in the past on old outstanding receivables. They go back decades, and I've made comments saying, let's research them. If they're not collectible, write them off. They're not a lot of money, and they basically just sit there on your general ledgers. So I believe the staff over at the finance office is trying to, make one last effort to see what's real and what's not, and start making those sorts of adjustments.
Did the audit uncover the unpaid parking tickets? Was that part of this process? Or was that a separate
because
process?
the unpaid parking tickets are not committed. They're not part of the GL.
Okay.
If that's something you'd like us to look into, we can put it on an agenda for this year's audit.
Right.
So they're not sitting there as a receivable. It's cash basis.
Right. Right. Well, it may be something to look at.
We can certainly talk
We
about
did
it
have an
offline.
issue in-house. We had an issue with it that came to our attention. So
Okay. Well, no, that's a good. I'm
Yeah,
glad
to
you
know
brought
what the
that up.
processes are and how we're checking before it goes to Plymouth and how we're
Yep.
checking when it comes back. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, we can put that on the agenda. Thanks for bringing that up. We've talked about excise in here. Some of those go back, and a simple thing like not allowing the boats on the harbor if they have outstanding excise. A policy like that would clean up some of those old excise bills. It's not a lot of money, but bring it in if it's low hanging fruit. Let's bring it in. Payroll and DPW. About 4 years ago, we did a big study on payroll and public works. So there was a lot of comments, and the town has chipped away. I think the last things that really need to be resolved are on the payroll side. That's the last things that still need to be resolved, and those involve some big steps. So this will probably continue to be a comment moving forward, just because it involves some big steps making these adjustments to payroll, and you got to be very careful on the payroll side that you don't make errors and people don't get paid by accident. So you've got to really watch that. But I know that the finance office is working on this. Stagnant special revenue accounts. So we went back a few years ago and listed for the finance office a number of accounts that just haven't had activity. Some of them go back to 2002 or even earlier. Some of them have some healthy balances in them. So the town, and then there's a lot of them, like at least over 100. So the town, I believe, has worked, finance office has worked with the town manager and with the department heads to see if they understand what these are for, to see if they can use them in there to supplement their budgets. There's some gift accounts. It just, there's no real good knowledge of what they are. And that continues. So I'm not sure what the town has come up with a policy since we last spoke about this, but some of the cities and towns out there are bringing those back. If they just don't know what they are, they're bringing them back into the general fund, or just allowing the department heads to say, hey, you have this extra money, let's spend it. But it's a careful process, because if there's a gift document out there, you've got to follow it. Any questions on prior year items updated? Okay. So a couple of minor new items, and all of these are fixed at this point. So we'll go through these quickly. The town exerted so much effort on the town side closing process that there was a couple of things that popped up on the county side. The finance office also closed the county's books. So we pointed those out to the finance office while we were doing the audit, and before we left for field work, they were fixed. So I don't view this as a problem moving forward. Student activities is an item that relates mostly to the school. There is a town component, that's why it's here. We've given the school a 8 or 10 page report on how they're managing their activities, and they've done a tremendous job as well. The first one that we did back in 2013 was very messy. Things didn't balance, bank reconciliations weren't being done. All of that's been fixed. So the school side, they're doing a very nice job. And on the town side, there were some minor items in the reconciliation from the school to the town. Those have been fixed at this point. So that's no longer a problem. School lunch, there was one issue that popped up at school lunch. And the reason this popped up is there was some turnover. So the individual that took over for school lunch administration over at the middle school was not experienced. So when they did the verification for free and reduced, they looked at too many income applications or income verifications. There's only a certain amount you should be doing, and they looked at too many. So she's been told that wasn't something she should have done, and it is corrected at this point. So any other questions? Because that does it for this year.
Any questions? Comments?
I just want to say thank you very much to Tony. He's been really instrumental in our improvements, but also, more importantly, thank you to the Director of Finance and his staff. They have worked very, very hard on all of these issues, and it wasn't that long ago when we were giving monthly updates to the board about the audit issues and what we were doing about it. So I'm really pleased at how far we've come as well. So thank you, Brian, and your staff.
I agree. It's. I was back. I served back in the dark days, So this is amazing what they're doing.
So it's a big difference, Matt, when
It's from
compared to your first
15
term.
years ago. Yeah, it's night and day. It's amazing.
Yeah, when I first came, you were on the state watch list.
Really?
And what the state watch list is, for those that don't know what that is you have to turn in your report before you can get your taxes certified in December. So, and that the state will not accept anything from the town. They only will accept from the audit firm. So they won't accept the town's records. That's where you guys were 6 or 7 years ago. So you've really made some tremendous improvements.
That's great.
That watch list is no fun. Let me tell you that.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move over to the Citizen Department requests. We have the Steamship Authority. Mr. Rainey's here to give us an update of what's going on.
Well, good evening. Initially, I wanted to address Mr. DaCosta's comments from a few weeks ago. I guess he was having a problem getting on the boat. Just a little background. In 2009, the steamship carried 64,338 automobiles. Those are one-way trips. So you divide that, that's the round trip. In 2017, the steamship carried 65,672. So a difference of roughly 1,300 vehicles over that more than 10-year span. In the same time, trucks have increased by 28%. So trucks went from 41,000 roughly in 2009 to just under 53,000 in 2017. So a big problem that we face, especially this time of year, is the amount of trucks. Everything that comes here basically comes on a truck. Your food, your fuel, your Amazon order, everything comes on a truck, and those trucks take up 4 or 5 car spaces each. So that's a big problem. What we've done in the meantime is we've increased the deck space on the freight boats. They've been widened and lengthened since we originally got them. 20 plus years ago. We've also increased the number of freight trips that are operating during the week by adding additional crew, what we call double crew and triple crew, which allows the boat to operate an extra round trip during the day. Also on the Nantucket route, we have the newest vessel, the MV Woods Hole, which is going to be operating here this summer, which has one of the largest vehicle and truck capacities of any of the vessels. So that's good for our capacity. We're also improving that the Woods Hole is going to be operating again over Thanksgiving and Christmas stroll, so that's going to help us at those times. We are looking into going forward, the addition of another triple crew for the freight boat in the wintertime, which would allow it to operate an additional daily round trip. Right now, it's usually 2 round trips based on demand, and to get another crew to run the third one sometimes is very challenging due to union rules and crew scheduling, but we're looking into that. Also, from April to mid-June, we're going to be increasing there are 2 during that time frame from roughly early April to mid-June. There are 2 freight boats that are operating on our route, and one of them only has a double crew, the other one has a triple crew. We're going to look into doing an additional triple crew for the other one so that it can also operate an additional trip. It's almost impossible for the steamship to add a vessel to this route right now during this time frame, and also in the fall, because all the boats are either running or they're in repair prior to the season starting. So there just aren't boats. And even if we had another boat, there are only 2 slips in Hyannis, and there are only 2 slips here. We have 3 boats operating. And if you have 2 boats parked in Hyannis and the third boat needs to get in there, that's obviously not going to work. Some things that I would like to remind people about are that there is a wait list capability on the steamship website, which means you can book a reservation in advance or when you want it at a different time, and then as spaces open up, spaces are fluid. People are constantly changing, especially trucks are constantly changing their reservations, which opens things up for other people. The system will take you on the wait list and slide you into a spot when it's available and send you an email and notify you that you got your requested spot. The feedback from that has been very positive, and most of the time people get what they want. There is a $10 charge fee to change your ticket, which I'm going to be requesting that gets waived in cases like this so that it's not a burden on people. There are also 6 preferred spaces for vehicles every day that are available the morning before at the Nantucket terminal. You have to go down there at 6:30 in the morning. Often you have to go earlier depending on how many people are there, which you won't know in advance, but there are 6 spaces available which you can buy, and of those 6 spaces, there are priorities. So if you have a disability or a medical appointment, or you need to attend a funeral service, you can tell the agent or the reservations people that they'll ask for some verification, but those spaces are priority on the preferred list. Now let's see, what else do I have?
Rob, could you talk about things that I've heard this past week? Like, why don't you just run boats at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning? Right. And we had a conversation, and it made sense what your answer was.
There are a lot of challenges to that. First of all, the town of Barnstable, there's a lot of pushback from them on how much we run. So we can't just run in the middle of the night because they don't want us to. Also, it's a union issue with the crews. And it's also, frankly, it's a public issue too, because we've done that on emergency basis and notified people and say, if you come down at midnight, you can get on this boat, and either people don't show up or they say, I don't want to. I'd rather go take my chances tomorrow at noontime.
And there's licensing issues with the town of Barnstable as well.
That's right.
What time you can start.
That's right. So it's very difficult. We can do it sometimes on an emergency basis, but it's not that successful. So
You doing questions now, or do we?
Yeah, but I'll take
okay, fine.
questions, absolutely.
So you've created some capacity,
Yes.
and can you ballpark the, how much of the increased capacity will meet the demand that you're now seeing, the 28%? Have you run those numbers in terms of?
It's difficult to predict that because some of that was big construction projects like the hospital, which is wrapping up now. The new intermediate school, that was a big one. Things like that now, but now we have a sewer project, a huge sewer project in
There's
its
always
place.
going to be big projects. So
Well, to a certain extent, yes. And also the more people that live here, the more trucks that are going to have to come to bring food and fuel and everything else. So
you must do some kind of a demand analysis that shows.
we look at the trends from the past and we look at the previous couple of years and we go from there. But it's economy driven too. If the economy's booming, then the boats are going to be fuller. Although last year we saw a reduction in the amount of automobiles brought over, probably we think because more people left their vehicles here when they left for the wintertime, and they didn't bring them back for the summer because the vehicles were already here.
I'm just asking, do you think is the increased capacity going to meet the demand that you're seeing?
In the short term, yes. In the long term, it's going to probably mean a new boat, which is very expensive.
Okay. Short term meaning a year? Or?
Meaning the next couple of years, yes.
Okay. So you are planning for a new boat in terms of your long range planning?
Yes. So the lifespan that we have on these boats is roughly 40 or 50 years. The three freight boats that we have are in the 30-plus year range now, so they're moving up in that. And plus the Nantucket, which is here right now, is over 40 years.
And would a new boat have increased capacity or?
A new boat would be about the footprint of what the Woods Hole is, because we have draft
So the answer
issues.
is yes. Yes. Okay.
I mean, there's only so much the boat can hold
No, I
because of
understand.
draft and everything else. So the Woods Hole was designed to meet the shallow harbors that we have and carry as much weight as possible. So that's pretty much the size limit of what
So that's kind of like is that like your model going forward? The Woods Hole?
roughly.
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just trying to order of magnitude. So
Well, Hyannis Harbor is very small, so any boat larger than the Eagle, say, or the Woods Hole would not probably be able to turn around, and they would have issues. They've had issues in the past with the boats stirring up silt from the bottom and creating shoaling and so forth. So.
And one last question: there's a lot of ramp up this time of year. People trying to get over to start jobs, bring their cars over. But you said the Woods Hole is just coming online here. Is there
The Woods Hole is coming on January 19th, I believe.
January 19th?
I mean, June 19th, I apologize.
Okay. So is there a way to? There must be some reason you can't do that before. But I'm thinking
It's being used right now on the Vineyard route, so there's this time of year there are boats going in and out of repair.
Yeah.
They're being spruced up for the season, so there's a big sort of dance of all the boats between us and the Vineyard, and it's complicated. And the ramp up it starts really in March, depending on the weather. I mean, this year the weather was so crappy that we didn't really have the ramp up until now, and you see landscaping and everything else coming over all at once, and it's that sort of stuff is very difficult to predict a year in advance. And these schedules are done roughly 9 or 10 months in advance, and they're put out for public comment and everything else. So it's challenging. Mr. Lowell from the Port Council presumably has some comments to make.
No, I just want to add a couple of things that Rob is saying. When you start talking about the size of the boats, we're never going to have a boat longer than 235 feet. That's it. Hyannis agreement and other reasons that Rob mentioned, but the Island Home is 255. That'll never be on this route. It just is never going to be. One of the things that Rob touched on with this wait list issue, the steamship is constantly trying to fix little things. You just don't see it. You're always going to have a bad experience. There's nothing that can be done to prevent a bad experience occasionally. However, there is a lot of work being done to fix things that, we hear all these things that don't work. We talk to them constantly. In fact, I had a lady and a caretaker and actually a school committee member in a house the other day talking about an issue that was brought up to me about 4 years ago that we haven't fixed yet, and now they really want to try to fix it because they've had more complaints about small school groups, kids under 12 and under, when they go on the boat, on the fast boat now I'm talking about, they don't get to go on till the end. Okay, so if you're a chaperone and you've got all these kids, what happens when you get on the boat and there's no place to sit with them? I don't even have to say what happened. So that's getting looked at. But as far as space, Jim brought up a lot of questions. You know, it's funny, we get complaints about bringing too much stuff here. Too many cars, too many trucks. Then we get told we don't have enough space. So it's a balancing act between politics and reality, Hyannis, seasons, weather, what Rob was saying. We have incrementally increased the shoulder season schedule to meet the demand. We used to have a summer schedule. Matt will remember this. Jim will probably remember this. May 15th to sometimes, in 1 year it went to November 11th. The summer schedule. 9 boats. That was when the Acatina was running. But still, that was a lot of service. We were throwing money away. Boats were traveling on the weekends with nothing on them. We've tightened up the weekend schedule. So you only have 6 boats on the weekends right now until June 18th. Something like that. Whatever the school gets out dates, they use that every year as the guide to that. We need to not throw money away on this route. We pay our own way as a 2004. We have this stuff goes back a few years. We didn't really pay our own way. Vineyard was kind of the year-round restaurant, and we were sort of out there in Matticat. Okay. Trying to make money for two months. We now pay our own way. It isn't free. We can't just put boats on and cruise on just because somebody's complaining, okay, or whatever. It just has to be done in the best way possible for that time of year and hope it works as far as weather, as far as other issues that happen. A lot of times people bring up car rentals. How come they're getting on the boat? Well, they go on standby. They do have some reservations. They're paying driver services for that car to sit down there. I mean, they're paying about the most possible money one car can pay to get on a boat. They're paying for our excursion rate. They're paying for a lot of things for us as far as the revenue that those vehicles create. So we brought this stuff all up to you to get on this agenda because of what has been going on in the newspapers and social media about the Vineyard route. And that didn't get talked about, so I don't want to bring it up, but somebody's going to say something. So that's why we're really here, is to really clear the air on what's really happening versus what the reality is. There were some issues with one vessel, the Woods Hole, before the Martha's Vineyard came out of its reconstruction, midlife they call it, but I call it sort of the quarter life. Because it's going to be around a lot longer than 20 more years. And some issues happen with the propeller on the Woods Hole. Is a very complicated boat, like your new car. Check engine light tells you how many pounds of air in your left rear tire, and you think you have to pull over. That's the way things are now. Things are complicated. That issue got resolved. It was complicated to fix. Denmark makes the parts. They upgraded the propeller thing, whatever it was, these gear, piston things in the propellers. No other boat has this new technology. They haven't had a problem with that boat since. Nothing has happened. Yet, when the Martha's Vineyard came out and the issues started to happen, it created a lot of media issues in and around that issue. So everything that's happened since then, with every other vessel that's a normal problem, has now become news. We're not usually in the news this much. So we want everyone to understand that things are normal as far as operations, and we're not putting animals in the luggage rack on American Airlines or dragging somebody off the plane. Nobody's been hurt. It has been an unfortunate time, though. There's no question about it. But it is definitely being addressed. So thank you all for having us.
Thank you, Nat. Thank you, Rob. Any other comments on the board? Don?
Oh, as a user, I had a question. Have you guys considered, or could you consider, when I want to book a vehicle reservation and things are really booked up and I want to do it online, I actually have it open right now. It would be nice if there was some way to just go in and buy an open ticket.
We're,
So that
we're addressing
and
that. We are-
and or just take me to the first available boat so I can book my ticket and then put it on standby. So
Yeah, we're addressing that. One of the issues that we have, especially with the website, is the way things work on the Nantucket side is completely different than how things work on the Vineyard side. Their standby system is totally different than how ours works. And just there are other issues. So to separate all of them in the web has been challenging. We are working on that, though.
yeah, and the misleading thing is, like, if it was just an open ticket, it wouldn't. All of these people who want to get on and off the island on Saturdays, they fill up like all the Friday boats, but they don't really want to be on them.
Right.
So
Yep. That's something we're looking into.
all right,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Anything else?
And the mechanical trouble that caused the cancellations today on island, how did those get resolved? And what
They got resolved. So
What were the problem?
Well, what happened was the Nantucket came over last night as an unscheduled trip because its service was starting today, and as it was arriving into Nantucket, one of the engines failed, and it was able to pull into the dock. The reason why it failed was there was a clogged fuel strainer on the vessel, which they were able to clean out. The boat returned to Hyannis with no passengers in the middle of the night last night. They changed all the filters this morning. The Coast Guard took it out for sea trials. They did their sea trial. Everything worked great. They brought it back in. They re-inspected the filters. Everything was fine, and it was cleared to return to service. So it's operating now with no problems.
That's interesting. When something happens like that, there's this long process has to go
A
through.
very long
to
process.
get it back online.
The Coast Guard has to be notified. They have to come in. They have to inspect everything. Everything has to be pulled apart. And depending on what it is, it could take time. And then it has to be taken out on sea trials and tested and then, eventually cleared. So it's complicated.
I actually think it's impressive how quickly, when there's a mechanical failure, you get it back online.
Yeah, and most people don't comment on that, but we've had some serious mechanical failures that normally would take weeks to fix, and they're done, within a couple of days or even hours, and the boat's back in service, which is a testament to how much everybody cares and everybody, takes the Lifeline name tag seriously. So
You may not want to get into the weeds, but knowing that it's just a dirty fuel filter gives me a lot more confidence than, so there's a range of.
Well, and to back up a little bit, so yesterday the Nantucket was in our maintenance facility in Fairhaven, and it was finishing up its little repair period before going into the season. Our general manager now is very concerned about these things, so he's developed a program to have these boats tested, taken out on sea trials, run around a little bit before they're put back into service, because previously they would just go from repair right back into service. So they took the boat out yesterday, they drove it around for a few hours, they did everything they could possibly do to it to make sure that everything worked great. It did, it was fine. Coast Guard signed off on it. It gets here last night and it's got the fuel problem. So, there's only so much.
No, but it wasn't a big problem.
Right.
In Jim's definition, that wasn't a big problem.
No.
So,
and fortunately, they
but
still-
all we get is mechanical trouble. So
Right.
it was like,
Right.
so it's not that.
Well, and
it's
that's
not
another
big of a
thing that
deal,
we're working on as well. We have a new PR firm that is going to put out better explanations for things.
If we knew that, it'd be like, oh yeah, that's no big deal.
Right. Right.
It happens all the time.
Well, it was a story until I talked to the Inky today, and they said, "Oh, that's it.
Yeah, right.
That's all there was." And I said, "Yeah, well," and so it wasn't a big story. So,
Thank you.
any other questions? No.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nat. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go move on to the Board of Health Steering Committee with the Genetic Altered Mice Project update in connection with tick-borne disease control. I think we have Dr. McNabb here to introduce our guest today.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's tick-borne disease is obviously one of our major health issues on this island, and we're always kind of looking for ways to deal with it. We all know about the deer, but a lot of us forget the mice are just as important in the whole life cycle. And we've been working with Dr. Kevin Alsvat from MIT, who has an idea of working and getting at at the issue by stopping the disease at the mice stage. And he has been to the island 2 or 3 times to talk to the Board of Health. He's had a couple of public meetings, but he's never really talked to the elected officials. So we thought this would be a great opportunity for you as our elected officials to understand where we are and what we're doing and where we see it going. So with that, Kevin?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. This is, as Malcolm mentioned, a project update, but it's also the introduction to the elected representatives of Nantucket. Now, just to provide a little bit of context, this is now going on 2 years into this open and community guided project. We first came here almost 2 years ago to talk to the Board of Health. And at that point, the project was just an idea, no funding, no laboratory research, nothing, to ask whether the community was interested enough for the project to begin at all, just at the laboratory stage. And just to emphasize, it's still in the very earliest stages, and we are very interested in ensuring that we hear from as much of the community as possible, because we want to hear suggestions, concerns, and criticism from the earliest stages, because the whole point is to ensure that the project is guided to the specifications of the community, because this is your project, it is not our project. So on that note, with respect to sensitivity to news coverage, we actually generally welcome news coverage because we know that we have not managed to reach most people on the islands, and we would like to, because you never know when someone will come up with something that we haven't thought of and that could be addressed. So we want to hear from everyone who is even remotely interested in these issues. And as Malcolm suggested, this tick-borne disease is an issue. It's not just an issue, of course, in Nantucket. It's an issue on the mainland as well. Lyme disease is the most common vector-borne illness in the US. You hear a lot about Zika and other mosquito-borne diseases. You don't hear as much about tick-borne disease, even though they're far more common. CDC estimates over 300,000 cases in the US every year. What's interesting is this is a comparatively new problem. So many of you might know that 50, 75 years ago, there were a lot fewer ticks, and there was a lot less tick-borne disease because many fewer of those ticks were infected. And they're infected not just with the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. Of course, on Nantucket is unusual for a very comparatively high rate of babesiosis. And there are a few other tick-borne diseases as well. And unfortunately, all of these are increasing in incidence. There's been a lot of news about tick-borne disease nationwide recently because, possibly due to climate change, the incidence has been rising, especially moving northwards. But it has been a problem for some time, and it does keep going up. And it is an ecological problem in that the pathogen is there in the environment. Specifically, it's in the mice and it's in the ticks. It's also in a few other animals other than the mice. But the ecological cycle involves young ticks biting infected mice or other small animals. The ticks get infected. And then ticks typically bite small mammals twice. So then they'll bite a small mammal again in the next stage of their life cycle. If that animal was not infected, it will often get infected. So neither the mice nor the ticks are typically born infected, but they infect each other. And so it's this ecological cycle. Now, we wouldn't care about this. We wouldn't care how many mice or ticks are infected. And in fact, that doesn't seem to do the mice any harm. Doesn't seem to do the ticks much harm either. But of course, the ticks can then also bite us, and then we get disease. So the reason why the problem has been increasing is because, number one, the deer. I know Malcolm and many others have been advocating deer reduction or elimination on the island for some time. And I would like to say, yes, if you were to remove all of the deer from Nantucket, then the problem would go away, based on what we understand of the ecology. But the community has debated doing that and has consistently decided against it. But keep in mind that that is always an option that is on the table. There are a variety of other control measures. None of them are really lasting. They need to be the sort of thing that you do continually. And the most important today is, of course, regular tick checks, controlling brush, and environmental concerns. The other reason, apart from the deer, many more deer than there typically have been, The deer lead to more ticks, but of course also it depends on what are those ticks biting, because not everything is a reservoir for the pathogen. The mice are important because when a white-footed mouse gets bitten by an infected tick, the mouse almost always becomes infected. And when a tick bites an infected mouse, the mouse has such high levels of pathogens in its bloodstream that it almost always infects the tick. So the more mice you have relative to other things that the ticks bite, then the more infected ticks you'll have. And of course, the more ticks around, then the more effective this cycle, because the more mice get bitten. So the idea of this project was, what if you could immunize the mice? Because it is the mice that are the major source of this problem. You have had an increasing number of mice relative to other small mammals that the ticks bite, just because the mice really like sort of fragmented woods. And we love living amidst woods and general vegetation, but we also carve it all up with roads and houses and so forth. So we maximize the edges of forests, and that's what the mice love most relative to all the other small animals. So we've been changing it so there's more and more mice relative to other things the ticks bite. In other words, inadvertently, we have engineered the ecosystem to maximize the number of ticks and the number of mice that are most effective at infecting those ticks. We haven't meant to do it, but this is in large part why this is a problem now when it was not a problem before. So the idea is, if we can immunize the mice against both the pathogens and the ticks, then we can hopefully make the smallest possible change that could restore the ecosystem to something closer to the way it used to be. Now, I say this is a community-driven project because we did come here 2 years ago to the Board of Health at an open community meeting just to find out whether the community might be at all interested, and enough for us to even begin laboratory research. And there was a lot of concerns expressed by different community members, but there was also a lot of enthusiasm for a new potential way to reduce tick-borne disease. So June of 2 years ago, we had the first Board of Health meeting, and the next month, the Board of Health agreed to jointly develop a project management plan. And last summer, the board appointed representatives to the steering committee. And Howard here is the chair of the Nantucket Steering Committee. We've also talked with the towns on the vineyard, and they appointed their own separate steering committee to also guide the project. So far, they haven't told us to do anything different, so things are pretty straightforward. We've done a lot of discussions on both islands. We also recently talked to Cuttyhunk. But the project is now in the hands of the steering committees. In other words, if you have a problem with it, you're welcome to yell at me. You can also yell at poor Howard here. You can talk to the Board of Health. You can talk to the Select Board. But the project is in the hands of the community to the tune that if Howard tells us to stop, then that's it, and we walk away. So again, the goal is to reduce the incidence of tick-borne disease. And I want to be clear, some of the news coverage has suggested we can get rid of it entirely, no more Lyme disease ever. That's an overstatement. We can't do that. It's endemic in the environment, it's in the soil, it's in too many different animals. Unless you were to get rid of the ticks entirely, which is really not feasible, you're never going to get rid of it. But it'd be lovely to knock it down by 90, 99% relative to current levels. So that's what we hope to do. So how would these immunizing mice work? Well, the idea is, let's find naturally occurring resistance elements in the population. Let's find mice that have developed natural immunity to either the pathogens or the ticks themselves, and ensure that all of the mice have that form of immunity from birth, rather than only developing it over time, as normally occurs. The difference would be, take this adaptive immunity and ensure that it's passed on to the mice's offspring. So when we get infected by something, our immune systems actually evolve, our immune cells evolve molecules to recognize that foreign pathogen and then tell the other immune cells to destroy it. The idea here is identify those antibodies that tell the immune system this is foreign, destroy it, sequence their DNA from these mice that are highly resistant, and then encode it in their reproductive cells so that they pass that immunity on to future generations of mice. So everything here would come from a mouse, There's a lot of talk about, well, what is genetic engineering? And there's a lot of terminology. So people, technically, if you want to consider the way the regulators look at it, a GMO is something where you take a gene from one species and move it into another species. So that's not what we'd be doing here. We'd be taking mouse genes and moving them into other mice. That said, it is very much genetic engineering. All the DNA would be mouse DNA. The source would be mice, but we would very much be engineering the DNA of the mice. So I want to be very, very clear on that. Again, there's two different types of resistance that we're interested in. One is resistance to the pathogen responsible for Lyme disease. With that alone, then the mice would be protected from Lyme disease, and the reservoir of Lyme disease in the environment would collapse, and you'd have many fewer ticks infected from Lyme disease, but it would not do anything at all to Babesia, because it would be specific to the Lyme pathogen. The other option is to immunize the mice against tick factors. And to me, this, even as an evolutionary molecular biologist, it seems almost magical that this molecular level recognition by your immune system against a tick, the immune system can recognize a tick and force it to fall off. So to me, that's amazing, but it actually does happen. And so that is another option. Take this resistance to ticks and give that to the mice so that then when the ticks bite the mice, they will not be able to get a complete blood meal. And then ideally, they will not have enough resources to move on to the next stage of their life cycle. They will die. So this would block transmission of all of the major tick-borne diseases transmitted by deer ticks, which is the vast majority of tick-borne disease. So when we first came, we laid out these two options and explained the first one is something we're definitely confident we can do in a reasonable period of time, that being years. The second one is more complicated. I'm not absolutely positive. We know resistance to Lyme is a thing that is very common. Resistance to ticks is just less well studied. So we're not sure how much longer that would take. And then, of course, the last option is do neither. So option one, option two, both or nothing. And the pretty strong response from the community was, look, if you're going to engineer the mice anyway, you may as well protect them against everything. And if you can reduce the number of ticks in the environment, that would be fantastic. So the way it would work, take mice in the laboratory. This is what we have and we've been doing. The project is actually led by Joanna Buckthal, who has been doing the laboratory work. She's in the back there. So she's been taking vaccinated mice in the laboratory that are vaccinated against either Lyme or against ticks, then pulling out their immune cells that produce the recognition factors, these antibodies, and then making them a laboratory and then testing them to see if they work. That's the stage that we're currently at. We have a few candidate antibodies that we're now testing against Lyme, and then the anti-tick ones are following. Once we have confirmed candidates that we know will actually protect the mice, we could then engineer these mice, that is, engineer their reproductive cells, the cells that go on to produce sperm and eggs, so that they would encode these antibodies that we isolated from these protected mice. And then their offspring would inherit that protection. They would produce these exact same antibodies from birth, and so they would be born with resistance. Now, we don't understand ecosystems. They're amazingly complex. Like our own bodies, our immune systems are incredibly complex. The hard thing about biology is we don't understand what's going on. We don't understand most of medicine, even how most medicines work. The only way to go about engineering a complex system you don't completely understand is to make the smallest possible change that you think might solve the problem and test it at a small scale in a controlled manner, as controlled as you can given the complexity, and see what happens. And if scrutinize it for everything that you might think might go wrong, and then if things look good, move on to the next step. So in this case, that would involve a small field trial on a different small island that wouldn't require releasing that many mice, and in which we could completely reverse the experiment by removing all of the mice and reintroducing the original wild mice. That field trial would then be followed by an independent study of whether it works and whether anything went wrong with the ecosystem. Because the number one rule of humans doing things is that we are biased. No matter how good our intentions, we are always biased. So the last person that you want to test whether a technology is safe and effective is the people who developed it. So we can't be trusted. You need an independent group of scientists, ecologists, doctors, statisticians, and the like to look at the field trial data, and those trials would be informed by everyone from the community who has any concern. You know, what about the predators that eat things? What about the food web? What about the things that interact with the mice? What about the things that normally eat the ticks? What about possibility of movement? All of these things would need to be looked at in the design of the field trial, evaluated by the independent group. They would then deliver a report, and then it would be up to the community of Nantucket to decide, are you interested in releasing mice on Nantucket? And then that's a matter of civic governance. It would be up to you. I assume that would mean some form of vote, whether at a town meeting or on the ballot. And if the vote would be in favor, then you would, as a community, release mice on Nantucket. Now, in order to do that, of course, you also need state and federal regulatory approval. So throughout this, we've talked to state Fish and Wildlife about the project from, again, very earliest stages. We'd also need to involve EPA, most likely. It's a little bit unclear whether it would be EPA or FDA, because every relevant law, federal law governing biotechnology was passed before there was such a thing as biotechnology. So we sort of make it all up as it goes along and shoehorn it under the relevant laws. So we don't even know whether it would be FDA or EPA in this case. But we would need regulatory approval in order to do everything as well. This would be an interesting one because I don't believe there's a case where a community would be asking the state and federal authorities for approval as opposed to a company for a new product. So that would be something new. But then, honestly, I'm interested in this project because I believe that science and technology need to be more open and community guided than they currently are, especially when you're engineering complex systems that you don't completely understand. And the reality is that all of you live here. You understand these environments better than we do. You know things about them that even the ecologists on our team who have been working here for 30 years, Sam Telford is our lead ecologist. Some of you probably know things about the environment that Sam doesn't know. And in our last town hall meeting here, someone who did not have a terminal degree in any field asked a question. She said, well, what happens if you release these mice that are resistant to ticks? That first year you release them, you'll have a bunch of infected ticks in the environment still that were infected previously. If they bite those mice, what if they fall off and then they try to bite again? Does that mean there'd be more infected ticks biting people that first year? And I looked at Sam and he looked at me and I said, that's not something that we ever thought of. We hadn't considered that. And that's why we do this. Because we want to ensure that everything anyone can think of is considered and evaluated and studied. Because that's how science works best. It should not be kept just in the laboratories. It should be a community project. So the unusual thing about this is people are normally used to scientists coming to them asking for permission to do something when it's already ready. So you have this notion that this is urgent. That's not the case here. We have years, and the reason is we're still identifying the best protective antibodies. Then we need to actually engineer the mice. Engineering mice is trivial if you're talking about European house mice. That's the standard lab mouse. We know a lot about them. These are the white-footed mice. They're the native mice of North America. They're different. We have to figure out how to engineer them and put the antibody genes in. We need to prepare for a field trial. We've been identifying candidate islands, getting permission to collect ecological data to make sure they're a good match for Nantucket and the vineyard, and collecting baseline data to compare to after the field trial. Then, even once we have the mice that we're satisfied with, and specifically, when I say we, I mean what the steering committee is satisfied with, then we have to breed up enough of them, go from a few resistant engineered mice in the lab to a few thousand by constantly breeding them with wild mice and selecting the ones that inherit resistance. Breed up enough for a small island field trial, ideally we want to distinguish what is the effect of this engineered resistance versus the effect of just releasing a lot of mice. So we'd have 3 areas of this small island field trial. One, release the immunized mice in one area. In the second area, just release lab-reared but wild mice. That is, wild-type genetics, so not engineered in any way, just wild-caught mice that have similarly been bred in captivity and then released into an area, just to say what happens to the ecosystem when you release a bunch of mice. And then the third area would be unaltered, just as a control for a baseline. Then you have to wait at least 2 years because the tick generation time is 2 full years. So if you want to see what the effects are, you need to wait at least 1 full tick generation, evaluating the effects. And only then would you have enough data to report to consider whether or not you might want to do this on Nantucket. So we're talking 2024, probably 2025, best case scenario. Potentially longer than that. So you have a lot of time to decide. But we're talking to you now because those concerns that you raise now will affect both the laboratory studies of the mice and the field trials and design, because we want to, again, hear every possible concern that people can come up with to make sure they're all looked at. So how would this work? If the number one concern is, well, GMOs and moving genes between species, and that's why the community said very clearly, don't move genes between species, just use native mouse DNA. If you're going to release engineered mice, they need to be 100% mouse. So that's what we're doing. The number 2 concern is, wait a minute, you want to release a lot of mice? So here the key is release the mice when the population is at its low point, and that's at the end of winter. So really in the spring, the mice starve through the winter, and so most of them die. Nature is red in tooth and claw. You release mice then, you don't need to release as many immunized mice in order for most descendants to inherit resistance. But the mouse population increases dramatically over the course of the year. So if you have 100 mice in a given patch of land, at the end of winter, there will be 500 mice in that area by the end of fall. So if you release 200 mice in that area, so you go from normal 100 to 300, the capacity is around that 500 by the end of the year. That's several mouse generations. That's 3 mouse generations, or 2 to 3 mouse generations over the course of that year. You'll still have about 500-ish mice, according to the best guess of Sam and our other ecologists, at the end of fall. So at no point are you increasing the number of mice beyond the maximum number that you normally see in a typical year. And you can, of course, reduce that number around people's dwellings by setting out traps and so forth. That would not affect the success of the project, because a trap has no way of telling, is this mouse resistant or not? It will just remove mice in general. Again, we believe in total openness, so that includes our funding. So to date, we are, of course, supported by our universities and through our salaries. I do some teaching that supports my salary and the like. We have specific project grants from the Greenwall Foundation, which funds bioethics research. So we have a team bioethicist who is sort of evaluating the ethics of the study, keeping an eye on us, and figuring out what does it mean to have this form of community-guided research, what are the concerns, and develop a model that we hope will be applied to other projects, because this really is pioneering. We also have some funding from the Rainwater Foundation, which has supported charitable causes on Nantucket, to conduct the ecological studies. And then we have a federal award for the antibody development. And we're planning on doing some additional fundraising on the islands this summer as we start preparing for those field studies and for mouse breeding. Project management is, again, we've talked about this, it's a steering committee, is in charge of the project. Joanna back there is the project manager. And the Data Safety Monitoring Board is the independent assessment group that would look at the original data from the laboratory mice and also look at the field trial results and write up reports and recommend going forwards or not. The steering committee, you have Howard here is the chair. You have Danica Connors, who came to the very first meeting almost 2 years ago on Nantucket, and she was vocally skeptical of the project. She says she is skeptical that it can be done right, but she's interested in seeing it go forwards in case that we can actually do it right. So she is on the steering committee because she is very passionate about this and very interested, and because she is a vocal skeptic of the project. And we want to hear everyone's concerns. And what we found is that at many meetings, we get a lot of people who have been affected personally or someone in their families by tick-borne disease and are very passionate about this and want it to go forwards. And we don't want to cause any community conflict. We can imagine it might be uncomfortable to stand up and voice your concerns and objections in public, and a lot of people may not want to approach researchers. So we highly recommend that if you have those kinds of concerns and you don't want to share them in public, reach out to her, and she will ensure that they're brought up at the steering committee. We also have Dr. John Goldman, who is the editor of the Journal of Immunology. Howard was formerly in charge of infectious disease at NIAID, among many other career accomplishments. Dr. Emily Goldstein Murphy is at the Mariah Mitchell Foundation. She's an ecologist who specializes in mammals. And Malcolm is ex officio member, and Sam is the consultant to the steering committee as perhaps the most experienced tick ecologist on Nantucket. Decision points for the community. Number one, after we have immune mice in the lab, then the Data Safety Monitoring Board independent group issues a go or no-go recommendation. You need regulatory approval for next phase. We need approval for the small island, mostly uninhabited, and continued interest by the boards of health. After that field trial is the second evaluation point. Again, same recommendation, regulatory approval, warrants proposed, and then vote at the town meeting. Technical team, we're very grateful to have a tremendous array of talent in many different fields, from molecular and evolutionary biology to immunology, medicine, ethics, and bioinformatics, among many other areas. And we have been doing our best to create this portal for discussion of the project online. So you can go to responsivescience.org and read about the project. And we're currently working on assembling a list of every question that anyone has ever asked about the project, along with a list of all the answers to them, ordered by most common question, just to serve as a resource that we hope to add to. And any suggestions as to how we can improve that and reach more community members would be equally appreciated. With that, I'd be very happy to take any questions or comments and concerns right now, or potentially after the meeting. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Yeah, you talked about you do a test, and if it doesn't work, you'll get the mice off the island. I can't get the mice out of my kitchen. How do I get the mice off the island?
So mice are invasive in a lot of areas, and in fact, so white-footed mice are not invasive here, but European mice are invasive. And there's been a lot of interest by ecologists in removing them because they're often very destructive, especially in island habitats. So there are specialists who remove mice through traps, through poisons, through you name it. And long story short, if in a sufficiently small island, you can remove all of the rodents. It's possible. New Zealand is actually the experts in this. Right. We have a separate project where we're working with them. But Sam has participated in some of these, and at the small island trial level, you could actually remove every last mouse, get every last one, and then release wild-type mice. Nantucket is small enough that in principle that could be done, but it's probably not feasible. It might be possible depending on where you could do a local release on Nantucket in a reasonably contained area. And then you'd have they don't move very far, the mice. Typically, young males don't move are the most mobile, and they typically don't move more than about half a kilometer from where they're born. So you don't have a lot of gene flow. So it might be possible to do the exhaustive trapping there and get every last copy of engineered genes. If there was a local area on Nantucket, you want to do that. But a broader release would be harder to do that kind of super comprehensive removal. But you certainly could
But on the small
go the other direction.
On the small island, you can do it no problem.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And even here, if you do enough trapping and trap down the population 50% here, is very possible, more cost effectively release equivalent wild types. You'll dilute the engineered genes out. And the crucial aspect of this project is we don't expect these engineered genes to be advantageous to the mice. That's very important because we don't want these mice to take the ferry to the mainland and then have it start spreading on the mainland. I'm an evolutionary biologist. That's what I'm most concerned about is we don't want to accidentally create a fitness advantage because then that would spread. But we also don't want this to be costly, because if it's too costly, then you'd have to release more immunized mice more frequently than you'd want.
Right.
So our expectation is it would last about 2 decades at a minimum, possibly more, before you'd have to consider releasing more immunized mice.
Okay. Jim, you had a question?
Just a comment, just serving on the Board of Health and listening to Kevin a couple times, that, this is, I could be wrong, this is a very unique approach to research. And it's, to me, just as the approach is just as interesting as the subject of helping to eradicate or reduce tick-borne disease. But to have researchers to come to a community, and I'm just looking at the, transparency and societal accountability are critical for any research that involves blah, 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 blah. So this is a new way of thinking about research in my mind. And Kevin is bringing a very new thought process as he approaches research in my mind. So that's just, I think it's everyone should be kind of aware of that. And it's a very refreshing and new way of doing research. So just a comment.
Thank you.
Rita.
Just, I have 2 questions. One is, do we have any idea of if limes plays some positive role in the ecosystem? And 2, on the uninhabited islands, besides people, I feel like one of the main carriers that I notice are domesticated animals. And I'm wondering if there's any sense of what sort of impact not having on an uninhabited island where you wouldn't have domesticated animals as part of the carriers, if there's any accommodation for that in the results.
To the best of our knowledge, Lyme disease does not have any major ecological impact. In fact, the main ecological impact that it might have is on domesticated animals, because invasive species do tend to get more disease because they haven't been exposed to it over time. I mean, the mice are a reservoir because they've co-evolved with the ticks and the pathogen for a very long time. So European house mice get Lyme disease. Native white-footed mice don't. They get the pathogen, but they don't get the disease. So it's possible that Lyme is keeping them in check, but it doesn't kill them. Mm-hmm. So it's, from an evolutionary perspective, probably not for Lyme, and that's also true for the other pathogens. They don't have a big enough effect to be keeping the invasives in check in some way, certainly not relative to the other factors ecologically. And in terms of the domesticated animals, they're not known to be major reservoirs. That is, but there is active research looking at this question of how easy is it for a tick to pick up the disease from an infected person or cat. I mean, we know from mice that you can do it, but not nearly as well as the white-footed mice. I mean, they are unique in how good they are at being infected and infecting the ticks. Nothing else is anywhere near that good. The reason why it can't go away is there are other species in the environment that are also reservoirs. They're just not as good at it as the mice.
Okay.
Well, I think the vineyard would be happy to volunteer to be that small island to do experiments on. So just feel free.
Duly noted.
Any other comments from the board?
I was initially really skeptical of the idea because of the fear of having more mice on the island. But I'm actually much more supportive of it now. And, having family members who've had tick disease and had to deal with that, I think that it's a fascinating approach. And I would like to see it move forward in a thoughtful, contained way.
Contained being the key. And that is absolutely one of the things that the field trial would be very good at determining. I mean, as best we know, releasing a lot of mice in the spring should not change the maximum number that you see in the fall, and certainly not the next year. But the field trial is the definitive real-world test of that. Is that actually true? So we will have very good data on that.
Anything else? Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is the Finance Department request for approval of an issuance of a bond anticipation notes. If you don't mind, Brian, giving us I'm sure you're going to do this just a kind of layman's terms of what this is.
So essentially, this morning we sold 3 series of notes, as noted in the first 3 paragraphs. The first series of $1.8 million, we received bids, the low bid being 3%. When you factor in the premium of $20,000, the net interest cost was actually 1.88. This is a taxable series of bonds, so it was slightly higher than the second of the $20 million, and this is because with the airport, we can't consider every piece of the debt we issue for them as tax exempt because of public or private purpose with some of it. So a portion of the sale that we had today had to be considered taxable, which is the $1.8 million. The second part is $20,750,000 of actual tax exempt bonds. This was for the fire station. It was rolling some notes for the water company as they finished their building, rolling some of the sewer borrowings that are not eligible for SRF funding, and some small amount of school money to finish the intermediate school. So that bid was 2.5%. That was the low. The high actually on this was 2.75%. The net interest cost, when you factor the premium in, which is the way that we do this when we calculate what we're actually paying for interest, this was 1.55, which is actually one of the lowest rates that Cinder has seen recently with all the changes with the Fed and potentially rising interest rates and mortgage rates and things. So she did say today, as Tony did know earlier, that we actually, even on the taxable side, it was still very good. These are some of the best rates that they've seen in this sale. The last piece is what we haven't done a lot of these, but we had to do this to fit with the borrowing. Is a grant, and it's a grant anticipation note. It's issued for $292,000. It's for the airport for one of their projects that does have grant proceeds, and we issued a grant anticipation note to carry that project through. It's actually with the vault room project that they have going on right now. The rest of this 2-page document essentially is authorizing the treasurer. You are authorizing the treasurer to sign the notes, and then you will ultimately countersign them as well. We should have them tomorrow. They were being finished today and then overnighted to us for tomorrow.
Any questions? Okay. Do we need a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Here, next up is the planning office request for execution of a temporary license. This is on Dartmouth. We have Eleanor here. If anybody has any questions or concerns, she can speak to it. Any comments or a motion?
Well, my only comment is, in total, it was almost a full lot. What was sold, if you look, there's Dartmouth there. If you look across all that was sold, in total, it was almost 10,000 square feet, which is the lot size for that area. So, I'm voting for it, but I'm just thinking it was a substantial amount of land.
This is just a license agreement for a fence, correct?
It is,
Yeah.
but that was preceded by yard sale parcels. This was all yard sale.
Oh, right.
If you look at Paul Jones Road, Derry Moore, there used to be a road in between that has been expunged through this process.
It hasn't been sold yet, but you're correct. What is shown as Dartmouth Lane, which has never really been a road,
No.
it's up in Land Court, which is why this license is coming before you now. It's in the limbo of Land Court, as we call it.
And it will be at some point that what shows as a road and was planned as a road originally is going to be expunged, which is fine. But and I just thought it was interesting. It's a whole nother lot worth of land. Just when you look at the
Ostensibly, you couldn't build on it because of the narrowness of it.
no, exactly. But you can't build on it. But you're adding that to all these abutting properties.
Yeah,
You're
which
adding-
adds
you're adding-
taxable area and potential buildable,
The
area.
well, we could go into. I could go back. The taxable it's adding is minimal. The most of the money that we get is the amount that it increases the value of the land is minimal. It's that when we sell a major parcel for $800,000, that's where most of the money comes from. Is the major sales.
Minimal is debatable because you're allowing people to make improvements on their property and they might want to demo and reconstruct. Suddenly you have appraisals that go higher and you have greater taxes. So that's debatable and depends on a lot of factors, but I understand your point. But at any rate, this license will terminate upon conveyance by the town to Mr. Perlman. So.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. On to the next one, we have planning office. We have A and B, we have Waldorf, this is Matacasham. Is there any questions there? We had recommendations from the Real Estate Advisory Committee.
I'd like to hear the conversations on public access. What was the comment there on these?
So the reason there is a one big beach easement is, as you guys have become familiar with this device to maintain recreational and conservation use within reason, standard reasonable uses of that nature. And so this is the gift that keeps on giving, the one big beach easement. Basically, every time there's any kind of erosion, it just moves with that reestablished coastal bank. There is access. Erica, could you scroll up a little? Thank you. So there is actually a public access right now. So if you go to the east, there you go. That's sort of, you can see the path. So that's being maintained. That's not going anywhere. And that's the one that everybody uses. That's the parking lot.
And it comes, if you look on it in a map, comes where her hand is, and it comes all the way across.
Right.
Town owns a property and owns a property.
Right.
In the middle, we don't own, and we're not selling, I assume we're not selling.
No, there's no authorization to sell.
No, not that one, next one over. You're right, those two little lots, are those going or no?
No, I believe those are not, that's not been authorized for sale. That's being retained for conservation, open space, et cetera. That's generally the idea with those ones that they're further to the south towards the shoreline.
I'm checking because the tail of the road runs across those two lots.
Right. And that's not being changed in any way, shape, or form. People have become accustomed to using that as a parking lot, access, et cetera. So.
Right. And I'm bringing it up because a couple times we've missed those kinds of things. So
well, we're more careful, I think, that since
you're getting better.
We're especially along here. I've actually driven out there a number of times to sort of see what the various public access. As you know, at the very end, there's a very nice path that's been sculpted out, and so it's been improved a lot out there. So.
And then one of the things that Rita brought up, which I think is interesting, is when we're doing these, when we're looking at this as a whole, we should be thinking about coastal resiliency and what is the impact. If we're selling stuff along the beachfronts or along the harbor that is going to encourage the bigger house that we just talked about as a wonderful thing, then we've got a bigger house along the beach or along the harbor with more hardscape and everything else. So I do think that should just be another data point that's put in when we're thinking about it.
Well, I agree with you. In this case, so for instance, this lot is an undersized lot of record, which means it was shown on a plan ages and ages ago before zoning. Yeah. It's supposed to have 120,000 square feet. It's nowhere near that. It's going to be up to 40, almost 42 and change with the acquisition of and merger of these parcels with it, which is lessening in nonconformity. That's a good thing. It will enable these people, if they ever choose to have up to 2,000 square feet maximum of footprint. Mm-hmm. And they'll be subject to all the wetlands and Concom. So there's all kinds of regulations aside from just zoning that will protect. But I understand what you're saying about coastal resilience, and that is certainly in consideration when we're dealing with these types of transactions.
Yeah, it's not like the point we've been talking about coastal access, but now we're becoming more aware of some of the other issues, and I agree on this lot for sure. It's not an issue, but I think it's.
But there is something that's kind of key that you said. Does this bump this from being it bumps it from being under 40,000 square feet, which would only allow 1,500 feet, to being over 40,000 square feet. So it allows them about 500.
It allows them to go to 2,000. It won't get the. I mean, it's the greater of the
because that was a recent change in the zoning regulations.
2 years ago.
If you had a lot of a full acre, even if it was undersized,
in Lug 2 and Lug 3, correct.
I don't have a problem with it. I just think it's an important thing
so that's
to
a
note.
third. That's a third increase.
Mm-hmm. So.
Third, increasing the size of the footprint by a third.
Yeah.
I don't know how big the house that's on the lot actually is. It might actually be bigger than that because it could be pre-existing non-conforming itself.
We're talking hypothetical here, so I just. Okay.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is this A and B?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. On to consent items, is resignation of the Town Government Study Committee. Any comments or a motion?
I just had a comment about the reason that was given by the person that resigned, and without wanting to know any personalities. When there is a disruptive or purportedly disruptive member of a committee, is the chairman, I guess I'd ask this of the town manager, what recourse does the committee have for self-policing? Is that the jurisdiction of the chairman to, because I know we all sign this, our kind of the kinds of behaviors that
The
we're
code
gonna
of
agree to,
conduct?
code of conduct, and what's the recourse that
I didn't bring a copy of that with me, but every committee, board, and commission member is expected to sign the code of conduct, and we'll be getting you a kind of an inventory of everyone who's signed it or not for your upcoming appointments. In the meantime, though, typically, yes, the chairman would sort of police the behavior of the members, and if it gets out of hand or is problematic, depending on how that committee is appointed or elected, it's a little easier to address if it's an appointed group, especially if it's appointed by the board.
right?
There are ways to discuss it and try to correct it and address it.
So in the appointment process, is that feedback that we can do? Should we be asking the chairs for things like behaviors, or I don't know, maybe that's too much, but I mean, what kind of, is that something that we, just hypothetically, that we should get some information about? I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I was concerned because Penny's a very, dedicated volunteer in the community.
I think we just, if there's an issue, this chair can talk to the chair of that committee and try to resolve it. And if it's not resolved, if we have the authority, then we could make a decision if we needed to, I guess. But something like BPAC, which is advisory committee to MPDC, that would go to MPDC, right? I mean, just whatever board is above it, or town administration.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the non-appointment route.
Well, that would be, if we're going to get the information on who signed the code of conduct and not, it's up to us to not appoint people who haven't signed it.
Right.
As a policy, that's
Yeah.
one thing we could do. That's up to us, each of us individually, but we don't have to do that. And I didn't sign it a couple of years ago trying to make a point, but it didn't really help. My point was kind of lost. But I do think, I think it's important that you play nice with each other.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I just,
Because we're all volunteers.
Yeah.
that means you at BPAC, Jason. I'm watching you now.
Please do.
Okay.
Now that you're there with us. Do we need to motion to accept the resignation, or is it just
So moved.
Second, write a letter and re-advertise, right? Do we re-advertise? Yeah, to fill the position till 2020.
Correct. So that'll be advertised.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I think we already have 2 applicants,
Okay.
actually.
So that passes. Next consent item is the planning office for, I'm not going to try to say this, but I'll give it a shot. Conokus? I was close. And Atlantic Ave. Is there any questions or comments? I believe this is also in, Real Estate Committee looked at this, has a recommendation. Any questions on that, Matt? Or
No, I'm all right.
Motion to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. On to a public hearing. This is for taking in portions of Holly Street. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry, let's open the public hearing, excuse me. Is there anybody here that'd like to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments from the board?
I'm digging it up now.
Okay.
Trying to find where it is.
This is more of a, I don't know if it's out of line to talk about it, but a general comment. So we get these, have a public hearing to consider the taking of whatever from a previous town meeting. This goes back to 2011. Maybe it's a little bit what I brought up about the our right of first refusal. I don't know what the inventory is of things that town meeting has voted for, and maybe the timeline, and then how are those prioritized? I mean, who decides? Is that a planning office does that? And what's their criteria for choosing? And, I'd like to know more about that. Maybe just start with the inventory, of what's been approved at town meeting and what might be expected.
Do you want to speak on that, Eleanor? at all?
I'm not going to go to great length
No,
because
I'm
it's
not
a
asking you.
we have a long answer, but
bring it back.
we are actually currently chipping away at a spreadsheet that was begun years ago. And when there was a staff transition, I frankly couldn't keep up with it. It was a very elaborate spreadsheet that if any of you have seen it, it's like 15 columns. It's very elaborate. So we're trying to actually refine that, make it more like what I give you in my staff report, because that seems to please you. It gives you a sort of the timeline of when it was approved by town meeting and when it finally came to you for orders of taking and so forth. But so in this case, this is just one of a little gap that was left off, and we've done most of Holly Street. And in bits and droves, basically. So in the beginning, when this process was just starting up, the town would commission the plans, and we do for sort of large swaths of things that have been approved, especially in Surfside, because it was, these very big articles. And then that tapered off a little bit, and now people are coming into us, and they're commissioning the plans. So sometimes you'll get just a half a block or a whole block, and they collaborate and they commission the plan. So we don't take that cost on. And then I deal with sort of the orders of taking. And then we go into the conveyance process, assuming it doesn't need land court, which of course adds a whole nother level of complexity to it. But to answer your question, I would say off the top of my head, of what's been approved since the beginning of the yard sale program, we're easily 75% done with it. Now, some of that includes, if not 80, but some of that includes land court things that are stuck up in land court. So they've been approved and we've begun the process, but the conveyances are being held up because of registration. So that's, I'm off the top of my head, I would say 80%. And Andrew might have a different figure because, of course, he's had his hands on this since the very beginning and so forth. I've really been dealing with it for 3 years.
Libby?
I was just going to mention that Andrew and I met a week or so ago about some of these real estate issues, and he did give me a list of sort of like low priority, medium priority, high priority items, which I will forward to the board.
Great.
It's just
Thank you. That's
on my desk.
perfect. Thank you.
One of the items that strikes me in this is there are expectations built. When town meeting votes something, then town meeting is used as rationale later. When individuals have come to the planning office and to us and asked for something, and then they've paid for it, then there's more expectations built. So if it gets to us and we haven't vetted the public access and some of the other issues fully, then sometimes we're in a difficult situation because these people have paid for everything and expect it. And so I think that that's why I ask the questions I ask, because sometimes I worry that, that people are expecting it, like James Street being one example that the board spent, 5 years ago, spent 3 or 4 times on, and it's kind of creeping back up again. Or like the person that contacted us all the other day who, so I think that we've got to, this is not, all I'm saying, but the process has to sort of, we have to be tight, make sure we're tight on the process so that we aren't giving people expectations and then taking it away.
Well, I can tell you, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same person who contacted you the other day, but Erica forwarded something to me, if that's what you're talking about. Those people purchased the property in 2015, several years after the RFP went out, and the previous owners declined to put in a bid. Now, we're now direct deeding anything that doesn't require via procurement and the threshold that is established for that. We are trying to direct deed, so it's a much simpler process. I literally reach out to people and say, do you want this? If you don't, can your neighbor have it? And we get an assignment of rights and so forth. But that's where we're going out and pursuing the ones that are still hanging out there, the few. But that in that case, those homeowners, I understand their issue, but they purchased it after.
Let's not get too much into that.
No, I think we're talking about a different one anyway, which is fine. I think we're talking about something different.
Stay bigger picture for
I'm trying to stay big picture.
Right.
But for the board, I'm trying to say there are expectations built into this process on the part of the homeowners that are purchasing because they've paid for it.
Right.
Dawn?
I just want to make sure with some of these that go back to the RFP is that, like, if there's any neighbor behind that uses that as a walking path.
Right. No, we look. I mean, we look
I just
really
want to make
carefully
sure that
at
that doesn't happen.
Like I go and personally look at the Google Earth, which has thankfully been updated very recently, and check and see. And I had someone come in the other day, for instance, who wants to acquire something that hasn't been fully taken yet, it's been authorized. And I said, I can tell you right now, there's a path there, and we're going to want to retain that. So we're very careful about looking at that because, you know, it would be bad if people who want to access, use a path they've always used to get to Surfside or whatever beach are suddenly finding that they can't do that. So that's
So
something.
nobody goes down Holly. There's
No.
It
There's
doesn't
no,
look from my.
There's no
my
particular
GIS
path
like there is.
right there. That's not one
It
of
looks
the.
like they probably use Woodbine, the people behind.
Yeah, and there have been some easements reserved on the other streets that are north-south towards the beach. So
when we get this report from Libby, it really maybe gets to my point about what is the criteria. So if there is a low, medium, and high priority, there must be somebody must have prioritized them, and it'd be interesting to know how they prioritized them, and maybe that's something we as a board want to weigh in on also.
I personally do not want to weigh on that. That's not our expertise. That's plus in planning, but I think understanding the process would help in the how they maybe they came to it. But it's not something I want to put for a medium.
I'd like to know more. I would like to understand what the criteria is.
Yeah, that's fine.
So okay,
that'll help us. I thought you meant we were going to start deciding on what's high, low, and medium.
I think, real estate is within the purview of the Board of Selectmen. Those articles say, they don't require us to take action. It's something I think we all take seriously. I think we should not just, it's great. We have great staff that makes recommendations, but I think it's something that we, that I need to understand the process and interested in knowing more about it and deciding at that time whether we should or shouldn't have a conversation about how we should become more or less active.
Makes sense. So any questions or a motion on?
Well, I'm going to move this. But the other comment, I'm back to what Rita said. We want to make sure we're not selling away a bunch of lateral streets that if there's erosion, we don't want to sell away their lateral streets, then have to go back and buy them, for $2,000 each, and then have to buy them back for $200,000 each 10 years from now. So I think we have to, you should be thinking about sort of the 50, 100-year vision, I think, on the coastal resiliency and on some of this. Because, we don't, it's great, people get their benefit, et cetera, but then if we have to go and take it again later, we'd be kind of, my son will be thinking I was kind of dumb if he's sitting here. So,
and sorry, just to Jim's point, I think that's where at least understanding the criteria that are being used for prioritization, if any of our priorities change over time because of something like coastal erosion or housing or whatever it is, then at least we know what they are and know if they need to be changed or updated. So I think it'd be good.
It's a great conversation. Back to this.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That motion passes. We have we'll open the public hearing. Consider an application for all the commissions, agriculture all the way down to HDC. Libby, how do we usually run this?
Generally, I think you determine if any of the applicants are present and if they want to make a statement of any kind of their interest in the group and or ask them any questions.
Okay. So anyone here for the Agricultural Commission? Let's go down the list.
Hang on, Jason. We'll get.
I would just say, too, usually it's a good thing to read the applicants' names that are on your list, just so you can announce who's actually applied.
Okay. Let me pull that up. For Agriculture Commission, we have no applicants. For Airport, we have, sorry if I pronounce these wrong, Peter Schaefer, Danielle Drake, Andrea Planzer, and Christopher Wazinski. Would any of those like to speak today for Airport Commission? Could you come to the microphone? Just state your name. Did I get your name right?
Yes, Peter Schaefer, yes.
Okay.
My wife and I have owned a house on Nantucket for 32 years. We've been vacationing here for about 40 years. I'm retiring in about 2 weeks, and sold my house last weekend in New Jersey. So we'll be moving up here in a couple of weeks. Actually, about a month and a half. We'll be moving here full time. My son also owns a house on the island, so we're pretty much penetrating the island as much as we can. I've been flying up to the island every week for close to 30 years. Put a couple of the private airlines into business with a couple of other people. I'm not an aviation expert, but I certainly understand the ins and outs and the aggravation of flying in and out of Nantucket, and I understand also the importance of the airport on Nantucket. And I think that's a crucial point. It's not just for transportation, but the medical needs, the business needs, and the other needs of the island that are served by the airport. So I'd look forward to being on the commission.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone else here for?
I'm Andrea Planzer. I'm currently on the Airport Commission. And I've brought a lot of aviation experience to the commission. I was an FAA attorney for 21 years. And also I'm a pilot and have an airplane based at Nantucket. I've enjoyed my time on the commission and working with the other commissioners and the airport staff, especially Tom Rafter, the manager. And I'd like another term.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you all have any questions?
No questions. Thank you. Sir, anyone else?
I just had a question. So we have someone, Peter is a new applicant, and then Christopher, is that?
He's a new app.
Okay. All right.
Okay, moving on to Board of Health. We have two applicants, James Cooper and Howard Dickler. Anybody like to speak on those? Mr. Dickler?
I'm Howard Dickler, and I think the Board of Health is very important for the island. I'm a physician. Most people become physicians because they have a need for service. And I would like to serve, and I have a very good background for making a contribution.
Thank you. Okay, Capital Program Committee, we have one applicant. It's Peter Kaiser. He's an incumbent. I don't see Peter here tonight. Cemetery Commission, we have Lee Saperstein and Francis Cartuno.
I just want to note Lee said he was unable to attend tonight.
Okay.
I'm Fran Cartonen. I've just finished out Bob Gardner's term, and I would like to continue serving on the Cemetery Commission. I think that the main qualification I have is that I've written a book about the history of Nantucket cemeteries and burial places, and so I bring to the commission background knowledge and also the knowledge of how to look things up and find out answers to knotty questions that seem to arise all the time. Are there any questions?
Thank you for writing a book about that.
Thank you.
It's important. Okay, Conservation Commission, we have Ian Golding and Joe Topham. I think Ian took off. He was here. No one's here for that. We have Contract Review Subcommittee for Human Services. We have one applicant, John Balash. Here. Hi, John.
I'm reapplying to continue working on the Contract Review Committee. I've been a member for quite a number of years. I feel I've made a positive contribution, and some of my fellow members tell me they like to have me on the committee.
Great.
Any other questions?
Nope. Thank you for your volunteering. Okay, we have Council for Human Services. We have one applicant, Daryl Westbrook, an incumbent. Let's see. What's that? I'm sorry. Yeah, so if anybody last minute wants to jump on Council for Human Services, we have lots of openings. Next is Council on Aging. We have 3 applicants, Linda Williams, Judy Perkins, and Vanessa Larrabee. Anybody here like to speak?
Hi, Vanessa Larrabee. I'm the Financial and Resident Services Director at Sherburne Commons. Have been for 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was the Office Manager of Academy Hill. So last 4.5 years, I've been with the elderly on Nantucket, and so basically understanding their needs and concerns in regards to what they basically, they have retired. They live on Nantucket. I feel like I can do more in regards to helping out not only with Sherburne Commons, but with the Landmark House, Academy Hill, and Saltmarsh. I was at a previous meeting where I was informed that Saltmarsh has over 600 members, and that the town itself has completely overpopulated, and that the building itself hasn't really it needs a little more help. And so I figured I'd lend my ear and give my expertise on that. So that's why I signed up. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, I don't think anybody else here for that. Cultural Council, we have 2 applicants, Emma Young and John Wagley. And Emma's here.
Good evening. My name is Emma Young. I have been summering on Nantucket for over 20 years, also wintering. I am recently involved with the Nantucket Cultural District, and this past April I was the only representative from the islands at the Massachusetts Cultural Council conference in Worcester, and that got me interested. I met some other people on the Cape who serve on cultural councils, and I wanted to kind of mend the 2, cultural district and the cultural council, together by being involved with both. So, does anyone have any questions?
I just like how you described it. You've been summering and wintering here for 20 years. No, thank you. All right, Finance Committee. We have 5 applicants: Chris Galacki, Peter McEachran, David Worth, Peter Schaefer, and Nancy Wheatley. Anybody here like to speak? Peter?
So the rest of the time when I'm not on the airport commission, I would like to spend time on the finance committee. My career has been in finance. I actually spent my first 20 years in retailing. I ended up I was the general manager of Bloomingdale's New York store, the $600 million, 3,000 employees. And then I started on Wall Street as an equity analyst. And right now I work for a small financial advisory firm, about 200 people. We do a lot of restructuring and healthy work. I'm the president of the broker-dealer. I'm fully licensed in all aspects of that you need on Wall Street for what I do. And I think that I would be a good addition to the Finance Committee with my experience.
Great. Thank you.
Just know municipal finance is different than anything else you've ever. No, I'm just kidding. That's great.
Numbers, there's still numbers.
There's still numbers, yes.
But can you explain free cash?
And both Peter and Nancy were here earlier.
Yes, they were. Yeah.
I saw Nancy.
And David's out of the country, I believe. So.
Okay. Now, last is the Historic District Commission. We have 1 applicant, TJ Watterson. I don't see TJ here tonight. Okay. Thank you all for applying and your service. Very appreciative. We wouldn't be able to do this without everybody volunteering. That's for sure. So thank you. Anything else?
There are a number of vacant seats that don't actually have applicants if people are looking to get involved.
Peter, there's a couple other things we could get you on. You're retiring. What's that? Yeah, Human Services needs help. Okay, so I guess we're closing that public hearing. And any other comments from the board? We'll move on.
Yep.
You shook your head yes.
Yes, sorry. Ready to move on.
Yes, ready to move on. Okay. All right, town manager report.
Okay, so we've already covered the audit matter, and I've prepared a timeline for the special town meeting for October 10th. You scheduled that date a week or so ago. The timeline is shown here. I wanted to bring your attention to a few things. The highlighted item there, this would be the date that, okay, so this gets a little bit complicated. Depending on whether or not we would have any ballot questions, might depend on when the warrant needs to be adopted. So any ballot questions that relate to the marijuana issue will not be able to, by law, cannot go on the state ballot. That would have to be a separately scheduled special election. If you were to have a debt exclusion for a capital project of some kind, and right now you have chosen not to do that, if something came up, I'm just letting you know that if we would be able to get that on the November state ballot, but only if it is at the Secretary of State's office by August 1st. So there's just a timing situation there that would have to be addressed if we wanted to get on the state ballot. Going back up a little bit, you had a little bit of discussion about how long the warrant should be open for non-town articles. And right now I've given a couple of days, really about 3 working days. And so just bringing that to your attention. I don't know if you want to change that or not, but just to also let you know, I may have heard a comment or two about let's open and close it in one night. That sounds like a great idea, but in reality, if there are citizen petitions and they miss that, there is a way to call a special town meeting with a certain number of signatures. So hopefully by giving people an opportunity to submit their articles, and they do need a number of signatures beyond the annual town meeting anyway, we avoid that possibility.
But maybe we could make it open Thursday morning and close Friday at the end of the day.
You could do
rather
that as
than
well.
keeping it open till Monday.
So, let me know if you want that.
I'd be okay with that.
You fine with that? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Thursday at what, 8 till Friday at 4? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. And will we have town council available to help people with those articles?
No, we have not made town council available for special town meetings.
Okay.
For that purpose. So the warrant would be, you're scheduled to review warrant articles again on June 27th. And today at the agenda setting meeting, we tentatively said that we would have town council back that day to discuss the marijuana potential articles. I think that was the day we agreed to, wasn't it? Or was it July 11th?
I thought it was July 11th, actually.
I'm sorry, it was July 11th. So, but you're probably going to have some discussion about potential warrant articles anyway on the 27th, possibly.
Okay.
We'll have it on the agenda anyway, and we'll see what comes up. So July 11th, I think you have some discussion about the marijuana articles. Then the warrant's open. Then we begin compiling the warrant, getting legal review of the articles. You're scheduled to adopt the warrant on Wednesday, August 8th. And then some of this usual stuff happens here. The warrant goes to the FinCom. They have public hearing. They review it, all that sort of thing. And skipping ahead a bit, they are scheduled to adopt their motions on Monday, September 10th. You would review motions and comments on Wednesday, September 12th. The warrant gets sent to the printer at the end of that week. The warrant would be mailed out with its motions to the voters by the end of September. And the usual pre-town meeting conference types of things happen, and then town meeting starts Wednesday, October 10th. There are a few notes to make mention of. The special voter registration deadline I now have, that would be September 28th. We do have a holiday, a couple holidays in here. The planning board public hearing is to be determined if we are going to be talking about any zoning articles. Citizen articles do require the signatures of 100 registered voters, not 10. At special town meetings, in accordance with the town code, appropriations require a quorum of 5% of registered voters. Transfers require a quorum of 3%. Otherwise, there is no quorum requirement. And I think those are the main things I wanted to mention. So I will adjust this a bit to reflect that the warrant will be open for the non-town articles Thursday, January 28th and Friday, January 28th and 29th.
Any thoughts or comments? Feel good about those dates?
Yeah.
It's going to come fast.
It's going to come fast. I don't know if you want to have any brief discussion tonight about the marijuana forum that we had the other day, or do you want to? Maybe we can do that anyway. Or
We can do it comments, or we can do it after the chamber one on June 4th.
okay. Oh, actually, I think we have tentatively scheduled the discussion of feedback for your agenda on June 6th.
Right.
Sorry.
So we can do it then. Yeah.
Got it.
Is that it for town manager's report?
Yes.
Yeah. Selectmen's reports. Any committee reports or comments?
The CPC had its annual forum yesterday at the Athenaeum, and there were some wonderful presenters, recipients of CPC funding. And also to note, at a regular meeting that occurred right before that, the members of the CPC just really wanted the select board to know how great town council was in helping advise and navigate the court case in regard to religious entities and CPC funding. So I said I would make that known.
Great.
And are we heading towards it being able to do it?
Under certain parameters, and we ratified those in regard to existing projects because of their historical significance.
Yeah, Rita.
The Affordable Housing Trust Fund started their strategic planning today. So we had a 3-hour session with Judy Barrett, and I think it went really well. Similar to ours, sort of testing the waters of why everyone's there and what we're hoping to do. Judy's putting together a survey that we're going to be sending out to some key organizations, employers, nonprofits, just to start to get a feel at housing, what some of the organizations' potential partners, where they're at with what they're doing and what they're thinking. And we are really just doing an assessment of our resources right now, and then working on creating that shared vision, shared mission, and then the starting to come up with activities, essentially programs, additional programs. And I think the big focus is really the transparency, increasing our sort of operational effectiveness, record keeping, and communication of everything we're doing to potential users of the people who would benefit from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well as reporting to other boards and the community at large. So it was a good session, and there'll be 3 more with a deadline of August to finish.
Just a report from the Intermodal Transportation Study Work Group. We have been meeting for the last several months with Andy Hill, the consultant from Desmond, and we are finalizing the design concept. We had just about a final design concept at our last meeting. We made a couple of tweaks, and we're coming forward for a final meeting on June 6th. And after which, at some point, the group and Andy will come before this group to make a report. We also looked at some very preliminary capital project cost and what the intermodal center would cost, and also some preliminary numbers on the operating expenses. Assuming that this is a town facility. We're now going to enter into more of a very specific and targeted discussion within, town administration and the finance department on reviewing the operating budget, and also looking at the possibility for state grant funding, and also before there's any kind of a real recommendation to this board on how we might move forward, and that's going to be taking over the next 60 to 90 days. So we're moving along. We're proud of the product we have and look forward to sharing it to you when it's all put together. Thank you.
We earlier tonight, and I didn't want to talk about this, or I should have talked about this then, but I didn't. I just in general, we approved collective bargaining. This year I have been out of principle, voting against all of those. I am encouraging staff and my fellow select board members to focus on best practices in these regards. I think we need to do in this venue what we did with the finance department. I think we need to adopt the compact community best practices. We need to include wage and benefit analyses in this stuff. And so I'm encouraging the board and the staff to do that. So this whole year I have voted against those because I thought that was going to happen after the last round 3 years ago. And I haven't been able to talk about any of this until now because we hadn't approved any of it. And we have, so I can.
Thank you, Matt. We had a Capcom meeting this week. We started much earlier. Usually it's August, September before we start Capital Program Committee. And we started this year looking at 10 years out and this new system. So so by the time August, September gets here, be much more efficient and I think more productive. And we're looking at having another meeting with the Select Board, FinCom, and Capcom, so we're all on the same page. Maybe doing that earlier rather than at the very last minute at the end of December, January. So those are all some good positive things. And then I also attended, I think some other board members were there, the Roundabout Public Information session last Thursday. And it was a good turnout. It was probably 60 to 70 people there. And engineers kind of went over why we were considering roundabouts, and then they split up into three big tables, and everybody looked at, the three proposed roundabouts, and engineers were there to get feedback. And I just kind of walked around and was just listening, and there was a lot of good feedback from whether it was a tree or have you thought about this, and I thought the engineers did a good job of listening. I didn't think it was just a, lip service. I thought they did a good job, so we'll see what they come back with later.
It was a very great exercise. Might be in terms of getting input, community input. It may be a model we can use in the future. And when people got to put sticky notes with their comments, people are really invested in it too. So I thought it was a great process.
At NPDC, we spent probably 45 minutes talking about that process and that meeting and how to move forward and engage the community.
This week you talked about?
Yeah, which is interesting, and it was, and it's not enough just to say, hey, we listed it's a public meeting. We put it in the newspaper. You actually have to reach out, which is what Rob and those guys showed us with the sidewalks and what we're showing here. I think it's a great model.
Any other comments?
Do we meet next week? No, we don't. Okay.
No meeting next week. A week off. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.